Hello and welcome to this video lesson for CPI 111. In this multi-part lesson, we are going to be moving into more advanced work in GameMaker. We're going to be creating the foundation for an RPG game. We won't finish an entire game, but we'll focus on some core pieces of functionality. I've got what we're heading toward up on the screen right now. We've got a little character who can cruise along and pick up pickups. He can slash and destroy shrubbery in the room, and then they've got some enemies here that he can smack down to kill. And then there's a very basic version of attack on their part. If I just run right over them, they will attack me. All right. Let's get started. As we get started, it is super important to give credit in large neon size style letters to Benjamin Anderson, the guy who runs Heartbeast on YouTube. The code we're using is essentially his code, modified, simplified a bit. You'll see it's still pretty complicated as we go through this. Some of the graphics we'll be using are from Heartbeast. In fact, I'm on the Heartbeast YouTube channel here, and you'll see here the image on his channel includes stuff that we'll be using from him in our game. So really, man, all credit to Heartbeast. I encourage you strongly, if you'd like to go beyond what we're doing in this set of lessons, we're limited in our class to how deep we can go. Go to his YouTube channel and like it and start going through some of his lessons. He's got a 32-part series on making an RPG game that was created in GameMaker 1.4 point something, but it covers a lot of the material we'll be talking about in way greater depth. Also, we will be making use of some of the code and the approach that he used in his platform shooter, which was made in GameMaker Studio 2, particularly looking at the way he does states. We'll be working on finite state machines in our lesson. So anyway, please take a look at his material. He's got lots of free tutorials online. We'll also be using bits and pieces of code from a Udemy course that he put together. So I encourage you to look at Udemy and at the courses he's got there. Wait for them to go on sale. You can get one for $10. Another way to go in deeper on some of the things we're going to be covering here. Okay. All right. So where are we starting? We're going to start this set of lessons with a starter project. We're not going to start all the way from scratch. I want to save a little bit of time here. So take a look on the Blackboard site and you will see a starter project that you should download and open up in GameMaker, and we'll begin to build from that. In fact, let's take a look at the starter project right now. I've got it here. I'll hit play and show you what we've got. There's actually quite a bit in here for you to get started with. So here we're seeing most of it. We're getting cut off a little bit at the bottom. But here, like the finished version of the game, we have a large room set up with a camera that is following the player around. The camera that I'm using and have set up for you in the starter project is the camera that we used in our platformer project exactly. I just, in fact, took our platformer project, renamed it, got rid of everything except for the camera, and then started to build things up from there. So the camera follows the player around as the player moves through the room, exactly like what we did in our platformer. We also, you'll see, have a little character here that can move around but does not animate. There are some issues with the player in terms of how he shows up in relationship to other objects. You can see sort of weirdly hiding behind these little pieces of bush here. He can run into and collect points from these strawberries. Again, I just left these in here from our platformer lessons. Since it already works, why not make use of it? But there's lots that we don't have here. We don't have enemies. We don't have states. We don't have a sword. We don't animate. There's not much else going on in here. But even this actually is quite a bit, and we'll talk through in our upcoming lessons how everything you're seeing in here works. And so this is where we're starting. Before we even do anything, though, inside the game, we're going to make use of, for this RPG set of lessons, a free resource online that you can use to develop a customized version of your player sprites, animated, and a customized version of the enemy sprite, also animated, that we are going to make use of in our project. So what I'd like you to do to start off for this first lesson is we're going to get out of Game Maker and go make use of this Sprite Sheet creation tool. All right, the tool that we're going to use, I will put a link to it on the course Blackboard site. It's called the Universal LPC Sprite Sheet Character Generator. And just in case you aren't looking at our Blackboard site and you want to use it, just Google RPG Sprite Maker, and it's the first thing that will show up, at least at the time of creating this set of lessons. So you'll see this is free. It's free. Woohoo! And as you scroll down the page, you'll see it is very complete in terms of a full-on sprite sheet for a variety of different animations to use with your character. What I'd like you to do is I want you to make a character set of sprites customized that we can use in the RPG game. I'll run through this very quickly myself, and then as part of this tutorial, and then want you to go through and to create your own. What we'll do after we have customized our sprite sheet is we'll save it out as a PNG file and then manipulate it so that we can divide it into sub-images inside of Game Maker. So let's take a moment to look through this. So you can see we have a preview animation of our little default character here. He can cast spells. He can thrust a spear. He can slash if he's got like a sword. He can shoot a bow and arrow if you give him a bow and arrow, and he can be injured. Only one direction can he be injured. Okay. You can choose whether you want male or female for your character. Yeah, my guy is male. And then for the body, you can choose all kinds of different body types. Here's later on where you will go through and create your enemy characters. You can choose what you want from a few different sets. I'm just sticking with the default. You can set different eye colors. I'll just leave those as default. Different noses, I'll leave those as default, etc., 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 etc. All right. I am going to give my character some pants. Maybe I'll give my character red pants. Ooh, I don't like those. I like green. No, I don't like those. White pants. Well, yeah, green pants look good. I'll give him green pants. Okay. And then you can give different shirts. So I'll give my guy brown shirt. No, let's give him a white shirt. Okay. And you can go all right down the line here, choosing armor if you want some armor, jackets, etc. Tie, hair. Maybe I'll give my guy some hair. I'm kind of a redhead, so I'll make my guy a redhead. And am I going to give him anything else? here, I'd like to give the character some shoes. Maybe just brown shoes work. Alright, so you can see out here as I'm doing this, it's showing me what the character is going to look like. And down at the bottom, you'll see in the shooting section, you can actually give your character some weapons. So for this RPG, I would like you to give your character some weapons. The way I'm going to run the lesson is to give the character kind of an oversized weapon. So like if you see here, there's this long sword, and if you choose one of the oversized weapons, you'll see when you get down to the bottom, it creates another set of character sprites that are more widely spaced out. So I'll use the long sword, I think is the one that I'm going to give to my character. And if you want, you can also, we're not going to do this as part of the lesson, but you could give your character a quiver, you can give them a bow and arrow, you can give them a spear, you can give them all kinds of different things. Okay? For the basic version of this lesson, I'm going to have my character be this, look like this, and I'm going to give them this oversized long sword. All right. Once you have things set up so that it looks the way you like, and if you want to follow along with the video exactly as I'm setting it up here, make your character look however you like, but as we go later into the video set of lessons and create the ability for our player to attack, the specific version I'm going to use is with this long sword. Okay. Then hit save as PNG. It will save it without giving it that name. If you're on Windows, it's just going to call it download. So find where it was that you saved it, and then you want to rename it. So I'm going to call mine RPG player sword.png. And once you've named it that, you can then open it, and I'll say edit in Paint 3D on my machine. Here we have it. And if you take a look inside, here it is all divided out. Now, we'll have to do some work with this in order to get it to work well in terms of bringing it into GameMaker, mainly because we have two different sets essentially within this single sprite sheet. We've got the regular one where all the characters sort of evenly are spaced out, and then we've got this second set where it's evenly spaced out, but it's got a bunch more images, and then we've got this third set where it is widely spaced out. So there is a tool that we're going to use in a moment inside GameMaker that allows you to separate these out into individual sub-images, which is what we're going to want to do. But it's a little hard to use if your sprite sheet is just giant. And this one is pretty giant. And so you can save yourself some trouble inside GameMaker by separating out some of these parts in here. And I'll leave it up to you how you want to do this. One approach that people do is to separate each individual line as its own image, just choosing the ones from within the sprite sheet that you're actually going to want to use inside GameMaker. Another one is to grab hunks of these that you might want to use and separate them out into separate images. Take your pick. I'm going to pause the video now, and I'm going to break mine up into different groups. I can tell you the ones that I know we're going to use inside GameMaker. If you look at the sprite sheet, it starts here with spell casting. We're not going to make use of that, so I don't need to bring that in. Then you look at the second set here. It's a kind of a, I guess like a fighting thing. We're not going to make use of that. And then you come down to the third set here, and here we will use this. These are sprites for walking, right? We've got the up, left, down, and right. We're going to make use of those for our characters walking. We won't use the next set. We won't use this next set. We won't use. It's firing a bow and arrow. We will use the set that has the player dying, so you want to bring those in. And then we will use the sword attack collection. Okay, so divide them up, remembering that basically what we want is the walking animations, the dying animations, and the fighting animations. Now I'm here in the middle of the process, and I've zoomed in and have cropped down on the walking animations. I just wanted to pause within my own work and restart the video to give some advice. As you are cropping, if you're going to crop down to just the pieces that you want in here, pay attention to the width and height. You can save yourself some trouble if you do a bit of work as you are cropping things out. For example, here I've got 4 images, 4 rows of images, and I can help myself by setting the height to something that divides evenly by 4. In my case, 256, since each of these images is going to be 64 by 64. That makes my life a little bit easier, and I want to do the same thing for the width. I've got, 9 images going across, so something, 9 times 64 is 576. So if you can get the width of this thing down to 576, roughly, then that will help you when you come in. You don't have to do that. You can adjust it when you get into GameMaker, but doing this can help. So here we've got those little guys, and I'll continue on doing the same thing for the death animation for the player and for the attack animation as well. All right, once you have all of your stuff divided up and you're able to have them ready to go, then come back into the starter project here inside GameMaker, and we're going to start bringing these guys in. In the starter project, I have organized the sprites that are already in here into subfolders, into groups, and you'll see that we have just sort of random stuff. We've got our wall sprite, strawberry blood, which we will use when we bring in some enemies. We have a folder for enemies, although no enemies yet. We have some greenery. This is all from Benjamin Anderson's projects. And we have some hitboxes that we'll use later on. These are basically collision masks that we're going to make use of later. And we have a player. And right now in the starter project there is just a single sprite in there. So let's go through and start to bring in everything else. So let's create a new sprite, and we'll call this one S Player Master. All right. And we'll use this to start bringing in some of the Sprite Sheet images, and then alter it to focus just on the specific set of sub-images that we're going to need. We'll create multiple sprites, each with its own set of sub-images. So we'll go to Edit Image, and then choose Import Strip Image. And for this, I want to bring in, let's start with our idle. That's how I divided it up. I selected just those idle images from the sprite creation tool. And you can see that when you get this in here, it's a little hard to work with. It's kind of hard to see what exactly is going on. I can, if I hold down the control key on my keyboard on my Windows machine, I can zoom in and out, and then the middle mouse allows me to scroll around this image, but it's not super great. It doesn't have the sort of zoom in and out features that we see in other parts of GameMaker, which makes it a little challenging. It's also, because of that lack of easy zooming in and out on this sprite sheet, I tend to take the big giant sprite sheets that I find online or I create through tools like the one that we're using for this and break them into chunks so they're a little easier to deal with when I come into this spot. All right, so what do I want to do with this one? Well, let's see if we can bring the whole thing in. So we've got, how many frames? We've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. We've got 8 frames. Or rather, I guess we should say we have 8 frames per row. How many rows do we have? We have 4 rows, so we have 32 sprites, 8 per row. All right, so that will divide that up. Then the width, because I was careful when I set this up in my editing tool, I was able to divide them into roughly 64 pixel by 64 pixel individual cells. Now, if you didn't do that, you may have to mess around a little bit with the frame width and the height and the cell offset and all of those sorts of things. But let's assume all went well, and this is what you end up with. I'll hit convert and then say OK, and then what will happen is you can see here, now we have our little guy with all of his various animations that we want. Lovely. All right. Now what I might do, let's try something. I'm going to save what I've got so far, and I'm going to come to Image, and I'm going to choose Auto Trim All Frames. And in doing so, now you'll see that our frames just perfectly match the size of our little character. I don't actually think you have to do this, but I find it easier to work with. Okay. Then what I want to do is I'm going to close this one out and close it down again. And now you can see I've got this S-Player Master Sprite. I'm going to duplicate that. And I'm going to call the duplicate version. Let's start by doing S-Player Run Right. Name it the way I've named it here. And in fact, I'm going to get rid of S-Player Run Down completely. Delete it out of here. Okay, and I'm going to open that one up, and I want to select just the frames that are our little guy running to the right. So you can see that's this last set of frames. So I can select everything before that, hold down the Shift key to select them all and delete them, and now I've got just the images of my guy running to the right, or walking, I guess I should say. The other thing I want to do while I'm in here is I'm going to move the origin point from the top left just down so that it's underneath his feet and kind of in the middle. If you look at the width here is now, once I did an auto trim on my frames, in my case the width dropped to 32, and so I'll set the origin to 16 and then just position it so that it's roughly at the bottom. You can run through to see that if it looks about right. It does seem to look pretty good. Good, and I'll save that out. I'll do one more of these in the video and then I'll leave it to you to do the rest. I'm going to duplicate the master again, and what I want to do is I want to create versions that are run right, run up, and run down. You do not need to create a run left. We're going to use image X scale with some code in order to show the left facing image. So I'll do one more. I'll do the S player run up. Open it up again, and now in that case that's the first set of images, so I can select everything after that. Delete them out. Again, change the origin point so that it's underneath his feet. The origin point doesn't have to be the same on all of these, but you should ideally at least have the center point be 16, roughly centered on the character. Okay, that looks pretty good. Excellent. All right, so do the same thing on your own, doing a run down. Okay. All right, we're able to do it. Here's mine. I just got rid of everything else except for those. And then I move the origin point right down to the bottom of the image, centered. Good. I'd like to keep things organized. So you'll see in the starter project, I already created a group for player sprites. So once you select the sprites that you've just created and drop them into that player sprite, hold on to the master if you haven't already deleted it, just in case you need to make some modifications later on. Okay. We also need to bring in the attack sprites, although we are quite a ways off in our lesson from doing the attack sprites. So I'll pause the video and I want you to do that. And we also, do we need to bring in, I made such a point of having us do the idle sprites. And then I'm not actually entirely sure that we need the idle sprites. I think we can, oh, we've got the death sprites. Well, we'll save bringing in the death sprites for later. But I would like in the video for you to bring in the attack sprite. So I'll pause and bring mine in and start to set them up. All right, well, I created a new sprite, which I called S-Player Attack Master. And then I imported the collection of attack images from that giant sprite sheet. You can see it's awfully hard to see. Your numbers will be different than mine, but you know, there are 24 images in total for the attack, 6 images per row, and then in my case I ended up with a frame width of 185 and a frame height of 170. So I hit convert, and that'll bring it in. You can see it ends up with all kinds of issues because look at our little guys moving all over the place, and the size, well, the size is the same, but obviously we have some things that we need to work on in order to get this to work correctly. So what do we need to do? Well, when we were working with the player run images, I had you divide them up, name them, and then do an auto trim of the frames. So probably we want to do the same thing here as a place to start. So what I want you to do, and I'm not going to do this all in the video, I'll do the first one is I'm going to create first, I'll do a S-Player Attack Up. We can see that's the first set here. Okay. So I'm going to duplicate the one I just created, rename it S-Player Attack Up. Come into that, get rid of everything after the up attack images, like so. Then I'm going to go into edit image and choose to auto trim all frames. That will help us bring things down, but you'll see there's still a problem here, right? So I wish it worked a little cleaner than this with this nice tool we're using to create the sprite sheet and then import those sprites. But it doesn't. It's a little messy, and I think that's okay because when you go out and are working on your own projects and you're finding sprite sheets online, it is rare that they're going to be set up just perfectly to make your life easier when you bring them into GameMaker. So I want to demonstrate for you how you can take care of this. What we want to have happen is that we want our guy, even though he has this sort of big movement taking place, what we want to occur is for each frame to have his feet roughly in the same location. Because when we go to create the object, we can move the object around by repositioning its X and Y, and we can flip it around as needed. But I want the animation itself to basically be as if he's standing still, even though he's making these large movements. So how can we pull that off? Well, here in the editor, what I want to do is reposition these sub-images so that their feet are all roughly in the same location. And if I look at each of these images, this guy's way off to the left, and then he moves over a little bit, a little more, moves a little more, a little more. Here he's got the sword right up to the top of the frame. If I zoom out a little, you can see it better here. And then here he's way off over on the right. So what I want to do to fix this is I'm going to choose the image that is the farthest to the right. And it's a little tricky. Here's his feet, and here's his feet a little bit over. So probably the last image in this row is the one that I want to use in order to have our little guy appear in the right location. So what I want to do is I want to start as this is sort of the base, this final image, and then I'm going to reposition these other guys to line up with this last one. How I can do that is to use this little button here, which is onion skinning. And what I want to do when I onion skin is I'm going to position the onion skin tool so that it just shows us a couple of images. You have to play around a little bit with this. It's kind of a frustrating tool to use, to be honest. But if I mess around with this little beginning selection tool and the end selection tool and then just start clicking around, you will get it so that you can see just two sprites. Okay, here's the final sprite and here's the previous sprite before it, if that makes sense. And what I want to do is I want to be able to select this second to the last sprite to move it. So I have to play around a little. So I'm going to select that sprite, move this onion skinning begin selection and end selection tool, so that what I get is I've selected the second to the last image, but I'm seeing an onion skin version of the final image so that I can see what its position is. Then I'm going to select all, and what that's going to do is allow me to select it's going to allow me to select this second to the last image, and then I'm using my arrow keys in the background to just reposition it so that the feet line up. They may not always line up exactly, but you should be able to get pretty close. Okay, now that one, I've got the second to the last one and the last one lined up, and I'm going to start working my way this direction. So I'll select this one. Now notice when I select this frame, I've still got the previous lasso around the position where I left it. So I have to be very careful, because if I just start moving now, I'm going to cut off part of this sword. So what I'm doing in the background here is choosing Control-All to reselect all of that third to the last frame, and then I'll position it, moving it over to line up the feet. I'll do the rest of this quickly. Come over here, do Control-All to select the whole thing. Move my little guy till his feet are lined up. Come here, select Control-All, and move this guy over. There will be times when the feet don't line up perfectly. So far we're pretty lucky, but if you have a situation where they don't line up perfectly, then line up one of them if possible and stick with that one. Like here, they don't line up perfectly, but I can line up the left foot. Okay, that's it. Once I've done that, you'll see now our little guy is standing in one location and he's doing the full swing of the sword. Beautiful. So that's set up the way we wanted. Now I can come back out here and I want to position the origin of this attack guy like I did all the other ones. I want it essentially near the bottom center. Now the size of this is certainly going to be quite different than the size of the images that you did for the regular player, right? They were like 64 by 64, and in this case we've got like 124 by 67. And it's likely that each one of your attack sprites is going to be some different set of dimensions. And that is okay in our RPG game. What's more important is that you've got things set up so that even with the big swing, his feet are staying in the same location. And you've got the origin point set up so that it's just in the center, right underneath the character's feet. In the video, I'm not going to run through and do the rest of these attack images. That is a challenge for you, is to go through and do that. I wanted to pop in the middle of my work setting up each of the attack sprites for an important note. So for the attack up and the attack down, you use onion skinning and you align all of the sub-images so that it's in the same position as the last image in the set. However, for the attack right, you don't want to do that. If you look at the set of sub-images, actually what you need to do is align everything to the second to the last image, because this guy's sword goes way out over to here. If we were to line it with the last sprite, we would end up cutting off the edge of this guy's sword. So play around with this crazy system for setting up the onion skinning. But now you want to select the second to the last image, and you want to align things there. So it's a little weird, right? How in the world do we do this? Well, you can see I've selected the last image, and we can see the previous image here, but so we want to move this guy over. So I select him, and then I move him back till he lines up there, and then I can then start going through and doing all of the other ones as well. You'll have to play around with this crazy selection tool again, just to make sure that it works the right way for the other ones. So here, I don't want that one, I want to select this guy, and then I have to move this back, and at long last I can select that to move him over so his feet line up, etc., and then work your way back. And once you have the attack sprites set up, remember, you don't have to make an attack left. We'll flip the image as we need to do that. You just need attack up, attack down, and attack right. And for this attack right, the positioning of the origin is a little weird, right? You still want to make sure that it's positioned underneath the character's feet, sort of centered on the character's body. That's so that when we use image X scale to flip it, it won't do any weird visual jumping around. So here I've got it positioned just underneath the guy's feet, and that seems like it works pretty well. And that's all we're going to do in this part, is just getting all of these images set up. It's a lot of work that you need to do. Make sure before you move on to the next lesson that you have you've designed your player, you've brought in and set up player run right, run up, run down, and then player attack up, attack down, attack right. And we'll move on from there.